good morning, or good afternoon, or maybe it's evening. It doesn't really matter what time it is, and it doesn't even matter where you are. We want to welcome you to Wholeness Wednesdays. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and join our host, Beatrice Hutchison, as we explore and experience our journey to complete wholeness.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Completely Whole's Wholeness Wednesdays. I am your host, Beatrice Hutchison, and today we will be continuing the conversation of the journey from brokenness to wholeness. Last week we discussed physical brokenness and wholeness. Today we will be talking about moving from mental and emotional brokenness to complete wholeness in these areas. Always remember that although we are discussing one topic, or as I like to refer to them as one pillar, whether it be physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, or even financial, all of these areas of our lives are interrelated and each area affects the other. There are too many of us that are challenged in this area as life can throw us some hard blows at times. Many are experiencing feelings of brokenness and defeat because of the trauma that they've experienced or have had to walk through at some point in their lives. Today, we're going to explore how we can transform our mental and emotional brokenness into wholeness that will be turned into or that will allow us to live more productive and rewarding lives. So get comfortable. As always, open up your minds and let's dive in. Before we dive in, let me give a disclosure statement. Although I have degrees in psychology and special education, I am not a mental health licensed professional. I am simply sharing what I have learned through study and through personal and shared experiences. So let us talk about brokenness, right? Let us remember what the definition of brokenness is. So according to the Cambridge Dictionary, it is a condition in which something is badly damaged and unable to continue or work correctly. A state of strong emotional pain that stops someone from living a normal or healthy life. So today, now that we are reminded of what brokenness is, we will be talking about the area or the pillar of emotional or mental well-being. Emotional and mental brokenness refers to deep inner struggles or wounds that affect an individual's emotional and psychological well-being. These forms of brokenness often result from traumatic events, chronic stress, or unresolved issues. But brokenness in this area can also be a result of something biological or chemical that's going on or even something spiritual. In both emotional and mental brokenness, the individual often feels disconnected from their true self, loved ones, and a sense of purpose. Healing usually involves recognizing the brokenness, seeking support, and developing resilience through counseling, self-care, and spiritual growth. Healing from emotional and mental brokenness is a deeply personal journey that involves self-awareness, support, and intentional practices to restore well-being. Later, we will discuss some solutions and guidance for healing in the areas that we'll discuss. So here are some examples of brokenness emotionally and mentally. This is how it can present itself in our lives. The first I'd like to discuss with you is emotional brokenness. I'm separating it from the mental brokenness. It's often characterized by overwhelming feelings of sadness, rejection, or a lack of self-worth. It might manifest in various ways, such as rejection and abandonment. An example of this would be a person who has experienced repeated rejection, whether in relationships, friendships, or even in their family, may carry feelings of being unworthy or of love or care. This can lead to emotional isolation, fear of intimacy, and difficulty forming healthy relationships. The emotional pain of rejection can create deep wounds that make individuals feel disconnected or unworthy. leading to a sense of loneliness and self-doubt. Healing from rejection or abandonment looks like this. You would first need to build your self-worth. Focus on developing a sense of worthiness independent of others' validations. Affirmation, self compassion, and journaling can help you reconnect with your inherent value. Healthy relationships is the next. Surround yourself with people who provide unconditional support and acceptance and love. Building secure relationships with trustworthy individuals can restore your sense of belonging. We do not want to neglect counseling. Therapy can help you process feelings of rejection and teach you strategies to build emotional resilience, like CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, or attachment based therapy, could give you some really good strategies to help assist with that. The next topic I want to mention is grief and loss. After the death of a loved one, a person may feel emotionally broken due to the intense grief and sorrow. They might feel unable to move on or experience joy. Sometimes they're stuck in that place of overwhelming sadness of the loss that they've experienced. Grief can break a person emotionally when they feel as though a vital part of their life has been taken away. The inability to cope with this grief may affect their emotional resilience. So, how can we be healed from grief and loss? We have to first acknowledge the grief, right? We can't ignore it. Sometimes we want to be strong for others, but we have to acknowledge it. We cannot ignore it. We have to acknowledge our emotions, and then we have to also understand that grief is a natural process, and we cannot put it off and avoid experiencing the pain. Another thing we can do is we can seek for counseling. We can also look for a support group that has with other individuals that have experienced what we've experienced that can also understand the pain of loss. We also want to honor the memory of our loved one, create meaningful opportunities to be able to honor those that you've lost, that they always stay a part of your lives and in your heart. The next topic that we want to discuss is betrayal. Sometimes being betrayed by a trusted friend, a partner, or a family member can leave someone feeling emotionally shattered. Trust issues may arise and they might struggle to open up and be vulnerable again. Emotional brokenness from betrayal causes deep hurt and anger as it violates the sense of security and trust that once existed. It can result in long-term emotional scars and wounds. How can we be healed from betrayal? We have to first seek to rebuild trust. Trust takes time to rebuild, whether it's with the same person or in future relationships. Open communication and setting boundaries are essential to restoring trust. Self-reflection is another. Take time to reflect on the lessons learned from that experience. It's important to recognize your worth and avoid self-blame in situations of betrayal. Forgiveness is another. Forgiveness is a key part of healing, but it doesn't mean condoning the betrayal. Forgiving the person allows you to release bitterness and move forward without carrying the emotional weight. It affects you more than the person that created the offense or committed the offense. The next is mental wholeness. Let's talk about this area. Mental brokenness can look like anxiety, depression, burnout, or just feeling stuck in a cycle of negative thoughts. It's important to remember that it's okay to not be okay. Acknowledging that you're struggling is the first step toward healing. Mental wholeness involves taking care of your mind just as much as you take care of your body. This means practicing self-care, setting boundaries, seeking therapy or counseling when needed, and surrounding yourself with supportive people. Meditation, journaling, and mindfulness practices can also help you to stay present and focused on your journey to mental well-being. Sometimes we get caught up in trying to fix our minds, right? We try to figure out what we need to do instead. How could we focus and nurture our minds? It's not about fixing ourselves, right? But we also need to give ourselves some grace. We need to allow ourselves to grow and understand that progress isn't always linear. Every small step counts. Remember, you are not your thoughts, you are the awareness behind them. Mental brokenness occurs when a person's thoughts and cognitive patterns are affected by mental stress, trauma, or even illness. It often involves deep psychological pain or disorders. Examples include, and the first that I'll discuss is depression, which is one that is all too common. Depression is someone that is feeling persistently sad, hopeless, and fatigued. Their mind is overwhelmed with negative thoughts, making it difficult for them to experience happiness or motivation. Depression creates this sense of mental brokenness as it distorts an individual's ability to see themselves or their situation clearly. It clouds your judgment, often leading to feelings of worthlessness and despair. So how do we get healed from depression? It's good to seek professional help, consult a therapist, a psychiatrist, or a counselor to develop a treatment plan. In some cases, medication is necessary, but not in all cases. There are therapeutic techniques, there's mindfulness, and there's also other types of therapies that could be helpful. We need to also practice self-care, exercise, proper nutrition, adequate sleep, improve the brain function, and your emotional overall well-being. So it's important to do self-care, right? To take care of yourself. The next that I'll talk about is anxiety and panic attacks. That is another area. A person with severe anxiety may constantly worry about the future, feel on edge all the time, experience panic attacks, right? And sometimes it can present itself as a heart attack, right? But it's just a panic attack. There are overwhelming feelings that they may experience that cause them to be overwhelmed. And so it causes a person to break mentally, gives them a constant state of fear and unease, and it's hard to think rationally, and they do not feel at peace. Some ways to be healed: we can practice some relaxation techniques, engage in relaxation practices such as deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, or meditation to just calm the body and the mind during the moments of anxiety. Sometimes you have to stop and just breathe. Therapy is another one. Exposure to, I mentioned earlier about the CBT that can help to manage and reduce anxiety symptoms by changing harmful thought patterns and give you some coping strategies. You want to also limit triggers, right? So identify those things that trigger you. And you want to make sure that you avoid them if you can. It's not always that you can avoid them, but if you can, make sure that you do. But it's important to first identify what those triggers are. The next area to discuss is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so usually it comes as a result of some type of traumatic experience, whether it was abuse or something that was experienced. But in this case, people get flashbacks and nightmares, and they just have an overwhelming feeling of emotional distress. They feel unsafe, overwhelmed, trapped in past events, and they're just unable to move forward. Healing from PTSD would include trauma-focused therapy, and so that's eye movement desensitization. It is a process. It is a technique that is used. Also the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy that was mentioned earlier. Also some other therapies that are specialized approaches to heal or help people heal from traumatic experiences. Also grounding techniques. You use grounding techniques like the breathing that I mentioned, also surroundings to help you stay present and to prevent the flashbacks. Support networks are always good because you're with others that experience the same feelings and understand and can identify with it, and you can be an emotional support to each other. The next area to discuss is self-destructive thoughts. This is when someone feels mentally broken to the extent that they struggle with self-critical or self-destructive thoughts, constantly feeling like a failure or a burden to others. These negative thought patterns often stem from deep-seated feelings of inadequacy and are often linked to past traumas. And so they can lead to mental breakdowns or unhealthy behaviors. How can we be healed from self-destructive thoughts? You have to challenge those negative thoughts, right? Don't just let them go. Challenge those thoughts and weigh them against what reality is or what would actually be helpful to you as opposed to focusing on the negative. Also, looking at mindfulness practices. It helps you in becoming aware of negative thought patterns without attaching to them, right? You can identify them. And over time, with practice, you can reduce the power that you feel from the lack of power from these thoughts that you are having. And then also you want to replace self-criticism, right? So you want to be understanding. I mentioned earlier, be patient with yourself. Show yourself some grace. The next area is burnout and exhaustion. Many of us feel this. It's when we're overwhelmed and we are experiencing constant stress due to being burnt out, right? We have lack of focus and we just feel overwhelmed. And so this is an area of mental brokenness when the mind is overworked to the point of losing its ability to function properly. This often leads to a sense of hopelessness and disconnection from one's purpose. You can get so overwhelmed that your vision is now clouded. And so how can you be healed in this area, right? So rest and recovery, take time to rest and disconnect from the source of burnout, right? So whether it's work, whatever it is, if it's family or obligations or any other types of stressors, disconnect, right? Relax yourself. Also set boundaries. Learn how to say no, right? Sometimes we overcommit. We don't know how to set those boundaries and say no, but we have to learn how to say no in order to prevent future burnout. And then we also want to reevaluate our goals, right? What are we really after? What is our why? Why are we doing what we are doing? So those are some things we want to think of and focus on. The next area to talk about briefly is shame and guilt. It's when a person is mentally broken due to overwhelming guilt from the past mistakes that they've made, or shame about who they are or something that they believe or feel that they've done. It creates a constant internal battle and they get stuck in that phase. And so shame and guilt can break a person mentally as it distorts the person's sense of self-worth, creating cycles of negative self-talk and emotional pain that just keep going, cycles of it that happen over and over again. But how can we be healed from that? We can learn to forgive ourselves for past mistakes, right? We always make mistakes. That's why there are erasers on pencils, right? Because we are bound to make mistakes, but we should learn from the mistakes. It's a part of our growing process. We need to also address the root of the shame, right? Seek to find out what it is, do reflection, and apologize if you need to apologize even to yourself. But that is something that you could also do. It's also good to always seek counseling. There are different types of family therapies that can help you to heal from deep-rooted feelings of shame by providing insight and tools for emotional liberation. Another topic to mention is identity crisis. So this is when a person is experiencing a feeling of loss. They're unsure of what they want in life or who they are in life. And sometimes this happens as a result of like divorce or job loss, some big impactful incident that occurs in their lives. And so this can leave a person feeling confused about their purpose and their values, leading to emotional instability and a lack of direction. Healing from identity crisis the first would be self-discovery. Engage in activities or journaling to explore your values and your beliefs and your passions, your why. Why are you existing? Why are you doing that thing that you're doing? Also, therapy, as I've been mentioning with all of these, is helpful because they can give you strategies. As a neutral party, that can give you strategies on how to work through some of these feelings. Also, embrace change. Change is not always easy, but it is inevitable, right? So as long as we live, change will happen. And so it's important that we embrace change as it comes. The next that I would like to mention is suicidal thoughts. This is when a person is feeling broken and they reach a point where they feel that life is no longer worth living and they entertain suicidal thoughts or ideations. This is when someone feels that they have lost all hope. It creates a profound mental and emotional pain, often requiring immediate intervention to restore their sense of purpose and connection. And so, what does healing in this area look like? Well, first and foremost, if you're experiencing these types of thoughts, these suicidal thoughts or ideations, you want to seek professional help immediately, right? From a mental health professional or crisis hotline or helpline. You want to make sure you reach out for professional intervention immediately. But some things that we can do if you have fleeting thoughts, you can do some things like develop a safety plan. And so you can do that along with the therapist, or you can also do it on your own, right? You can identify things that help you to feel better in a moment. When you're experiencing things, what are some things that make you happy? And you can write that and put it on something, keep it near you at all times. Maybe always carry it in your pocketbook, keep it, in your pocket, but always have your safety plan with you until you can, of course, memorize it. But know those go-to areas or things that you could do in those moments of crisis that help you feel better. At the beginning of our discussion today, I mentioned that all the pillars, right, are interrelated, that they all impact the other areas. I want to just share with you something called the ACEs. And so what that is adverse childhood experiences. It was a collaborative effort from Kaiser Permanente and the CDC many, many years ago, or maybe 20-something years ago at this point. And it looked at the relationship of adverse child experiences and health status. And so it was 25 years ago, back in 1998, but it was the largest study of its kind. It looked at 18,000 participants, and it examined the health and the social effects of adverse childhood experiences over the lifespan. And the majority of the participants were 50 or older, and that was 62% of them, and 77% were white and had attended college. 72% of those had attended college. So it evaluated adults that had experienced childhood trauma across 10 different categories. Physical abuse by parents, physical abuse by others, physical abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect, substance abuse, mental illness, parents that were separated or divorced, a mother that was treated violently, right, domestic violence, or a family member that was imprisoned. And so with the ACE study, it created scores. And so if you score 4 or more, it showed that 4 or more times, people are 4 or more times likely to experience health conditions as a result of the trauma that they've been through. So they were twice as likely to be diagnosed with cancer, twice as likely to have heart disease, 4 times as likely to suffer from emphysema and chronic bronchitis, 12 times as likely to have attempted suicide, 10 times more likely to have injected street drugs. And so the power of the ACEs, it really gave data to help everyone to understand, right, that ACEs are common. Everyone has experienced some type of trauma, but that it also accounts for a large percentage of the health and social problems that we see in society. And so childhood trauma increases the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have tripled the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung disease, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And so that was shared by Dr. Nadine Burke, who did some work around the ACEs study, just looking at it and its connection in the work that she was doing in California. So for a child, their brain is rapidly developing, right? So any exposure to high stressful experiences can have lasting negative effects on the children. And so it can become, it can cause debilitating factors. It can cause reactions in the body, especially if they're living in poverty or any adverse types of living situations, it could really, really impact them physically, mentally, and we're seeing through the ACEs study that also physically. And so if we think about it, we may all say that we've experienced some form of trauma to some extent or another, right? So whether or not we were in, if we fall within those categories that I shared, but some grief and loss is a traumatic experience, right? Or something that we've seen, right? Anything that we've experienced that's caused trauma to us, caused any pain or any type of loss to us can be very, very debilitating. And it is trauma. And so it can impact us physically. And so that's why we want to make sure we get on top of it, right? Not only that we want to be healed in our minds emotionally and mentally, but we also want to have a good opportunity of having a good lifespan, right? A good quality of life. All right. So now let us talk about some general healing tips for emotional and mental brokenness, right? So these can be used across all the things that we talked about to help, right? Emotionally and mentally with that brokenness you may experience so that we can move from the brokenness toward wholeness, right? That is our goal here together. So the first thing we want to do is we want to be honest with ourselves, right? And acknowledge, yes, I may have experienced some brokenness in this area, right? Maybe I've experienced some traumas, and yes, I do have some issues I need to work through. The next thing we want to do is we want to realize that it's not about what you've done. It's not about you messing up or not being good enough. It's not about any of those things. It's not about what you've done, but it's about what has happened to you, right? Because we experience traumas in our lives and we have no control over those things, right? They're outside of our control. So it's not about what we've done, what's wrong with us, but it's about what has happened to us. Something else we want to do is we want to practice gratitude, right? And it's very important. Find those things that you could be grateful for. Sometimes you can go through and it could be so difficult or overwhelming at times that you find it hard to find things to be grateful for, right? But number one, you could be grateful for life, right? That you're able to breathe fresh air and that you have the use of your limbs, right? You can walk or you can talk or, if that is your situation, right? I understand that some may not. But find those things that you do have going well for yourself and experience and have gratitude around those things. And so if you can focus on something that you could be grateful for, it could shift that your mindset from that scarcity mindset to more of an abundance mindset. And so that could help you to create or cultivate emotional resilience. So it's important that you find that thing to be grateful for. The next thing we want to do is we want to develop a routine, right? It's very important that we have a consistent daily schedule, right? Or at least daily activities that happen on a consistent basis, right? It could help us to really experience a sense of control and some sense of normalcy, right? That could be beneficial overall to our mental and emotional health. Also, spirituality, meditation, we can really engage in some of those practices, right? So because it can help us feel a deeper sense of purpose and could even give us some peace, right? So that's what we're looking for. We're after, especially when we are going through these types of challenges. The next thing we want to make sure that we do is that we exercise. We need to get up and moving around, right? Engaging in some type of activity. Increase your activity from what you normally do on a normal basis, because when you exercise, it releases endorphins, and the endorphins help you to feel happier, right? It shifts your mood. So it's important to exercise. When you're experiencing these types of situations, definitely get up and moving. Go do something. Don't stay inside in a dark room or in the bed laying down or just lounging around on the couch. Get up and get moving. Get those endorphins going. Another thing we want to do, I mentioned earlier about a safety plan. What a safety plan is a 5-step plan, right? So the 5 things that you identify to say, when I'm in a moment where I'm being triggered and there's something that I am about to lose it over, right? Or just, either outwardly or inwardly, something that just challenges us mentally and emotionally. In the moment, if we have 5 things that we could resort to that would help us feel happy, that would help us find peace, then those would be what you would put as a part of your 5-step plan. Like, so for me, I need to pray, right? I need to breathe. I need to sing, right? So I need to do something to distract me from the trigger or whatever the challenge is, so that I can kind of regain my composure. And this works for everyone. And so at my job, we actually we went through a training called the Sanctuary Model, and that came through Andrus. And what it really is it's a trauma informed approach to building organizations, like agencies that are nonprofit social service types of agencies. And so it talks about some of the things that I mentioned here. It talks about the ACEs study that I talked about, that I mentioned earlier, but it also talks about the safety plan. So they gave us these really neat things where on one side it has a safety plan, and then on the other side it has a self-care plan, which we'll talk about next. But in that safety plan, those are those things that help me to be safe in the moment when something is happening that's outside of my control, something that's triggered me. Those are my 5 things that I do that help to calm me down, help me to feel peaceful. Now, the other is a self-care plan. And so that is important. And I have this little neat one where we were able to write on it. It has a little clip, so you can clip it onto yourself when you're put it in your pocket, or clip it onto your clothes. I mean, but that's what I have. But you don't need to be that fancy, right? You can have a piece of paper. You could jot it down in the notes section in your phone. Anything that you can have with you at all times. If you put it on a piece of paper, make sure you keep it in your pocket, or you carry it in your pocketbook, or wherever, your book bag. Make sure it's someplace that's accessible, right? And so with the self-care plan, you have to be intentional about taking care of yourself. And so if you're not intentional about it, it won't happen, because we get busy with everyday life, right? And so we're always doing one thing or another, and we don't always stop to take care of ourselves. We talked about that last week. So if we create or write down a safety plan, right? And so that looks very similar. It's 5 things that I will do on an ongoing basis, right? Whereas a safety plan is, what do I do in the moment, right? A self-care plan is, what do I do on an ongoing basis to take care of myself? So whether or not that's maybe listen to music, listen to affirmations, maybe reading, maybe taking a bath, having some me time, whatever that looks like for you, that helps you to stay peaceful, helps you to regain your self-worth, your focus, all of those things. Find out what those items are for you and write them down and keep them accessible to you, so that you can make sure that you keep to it, right? In my line of work, we like to say, if you don't write it down, right? If it's not written, then it didn't happen. So I encourage you, write the vision, make it plain, right? You want to make sure you have it written somewhere so that you follow it. If you write it, you're more likely to be committed to it and to carry those things out, right? So make sure you do that. Very, very important. Another thing you want to do is to also think about identifying a support group, a group of other individuals, or a support system. There may not be a support group of others that have experienced the same types of traumas or the same types of challenges that you have, but you can identify some other support systems, whether it be in your church or your family. Identify some others outside of yourself that could be a support system to you. Another thing that I want to mention are essential oils. Essential oils are very, very important. Yes. And so you could either diffuse them. And what that means is that you put them with some water inside a little diffuser, and they have them all over the place now. They have the ones that you could plug in, the one that have USB, the ones you could put in your car. Like there's so many of them. But you can diffuse them, or you can directly inhale it. And so just to show you just a couple, I have, so there we have this particular one is lavender. And so it's an essential oil. So you can either put it in your diffuser and diffuse it where the scent is emitted into the atmosphere, right? Or you can simply put it to your nose, and they're very potent, I'd say. So you can definitely just have it under your nose and you can smell it, right? But when you do that with essential oils, when you take anything in through that olfaction area or from that perspective, it goes in immediately, so it has positive impact on your mood. So there's certain essential oils that are specific to that, right? And so essential oils generally come from different types of flowers, right? Different things in nature that are really go through this distilling process, and then they're they're really concentrated levels of whatever. It takes a lot of flowers to really bring down and put into to get even and get into a bottle, right? So it's a lot. But my point is that essential oils can be very, very helpful when it comes to helping to calm yourself or to shift the mood or to help you become in a better mood, right? It has a positive impact on your mood. And so it's the smell, the sense of smell, the olfaction is the only sense that could have direct effects on the limbic region of your brain, right? So there was a study that was done at the University of Vienna where it shows that some essential oils can stimulate blood flow and activity to the emotional region of the brain. There was a clinical study at the Department of Psychiatry at the My University of Medicine where they found out that lemon, which is of course, and that was taken from the fruit, the lemon, right? It not only reduces depression, but it also reduces stress when it's inhaled, right? So like I just showed you, just inhale it. Other essential oils can have positive impact on your mental and emotional well-being. Others like lavender. Lavender is the one that I just showed you. But also others like Roman chamomile and Melissa and jasmine and frankincense. Another one that I have here. And peppermint. Also another one that I have, and ylang ylang. Rosemary is another one, and also cedarwood. And so lemon was mentioned, I mentioned about in the study, but anything that's citrus can have the same effect. This is orange here that I have. And so essential oils could also be very, very beneficial in shifting your mood. The next thing I want to talk about, or the next thing that we could add to our plan, right, as we're working on our journey to wholeness, is spiritually, right? So I mentioned earlier on that it could also that it can happen, or any of these challenges emotionally and mentally could be a result of something that has happened as a result of trauma, right? And we've spoken a lot about that. And I also mentioned that it could also have roots in something or be connected biologically, right? It could be in relation to some type of a chemical imbalance that we're having, which is why, these types of things that we were talking about, the exercise, we're going to talk about nutrition as well. But the essential oils, those sorts of things help when we have some imbalances going on chemically. But spiritually, it could also be a result of something spiritual that is going on with you. And so I understand that everyone doesn't believe that way, but for those that are believers, it could be a result of a spiritual attack that you're under, right? It could be something that comes upon you that you have to seek freedom from, right? And so whether you go into prayer, right, a time of fasting, which is of course, fasting from food, withdrawal from food, speaking the word. And what I mean by that is finding scriptures that pertain to the issues that you're going through and speak those scriptures over those areas and those challenges in your life. Also, speaking in tongues, for those of you that believe that way, it's your heavenly language. It's building yourself up in your most holy faith. And so that also could help you to get some freedom in this area, as well as just deliverance, right? Just working with others. You can do self-deliverance or working with others that or other ministers or other servants that could come and pray with you and could bring about deliverance, right? Everyone is not gifted in that area, but there are those that are, right? And so they can help you to get your freedom in that area. So it could also be, its root could also be spiritual, right? Another thing that I want to talk about is that, so I talked about that self-care plan, right? So we want to identify things that help us to feel calm, right? So if that's a bath, you have to really be intentional about scheduling time away from everything, right? To make sure that you do these things. And so sometimes people will say, you know what, I go for females, we go and get our hair done, we get our nails done, we get a pedicure, those types of things, go to the spa, those types of things, to help us take care of ourselves. But it has to be an intentional time that we take, that we just set aside to take care of ourselves. And so also I mentioned about it having some biological roots, right? What could also help with that would be intaking or taking additional vitamins or minerals. And so of course, initially we don't want to think about supplements, right? Or any types of pills, I'd say. We first want to resort to the foods, right? So where there are different vitamins in foods, we want to focus on those, increasing our intake of that. But it's proven that vitamins and minerals, they can improve our mood as well. So vitamin B6 is one. It regulates the brain and the neurotransmitter functions, and helps you to maintain optimal mood. And you can find B6 in legumes and cabbage, green leafy vegetables, and also whole grains. Vitamin B12 is another, those powerful B vitamins, right? It helps in the maintenance of the nervous system and can cause fatigue and depression when you're deficient in that vitamin, right? So you can find B12 in eggs and cheese and fish and meat. If you're vegan, you can find it in things like sprouted grains or miso. Those could also be helpful, but you want to find things that could also give you B12. Another vitamin that's very, very helpful is vitamin D. And so that helps with calcium absorption, and it contributes to your bone and brain function, your brain structure maintenance. And so when you're deficient in vitamin D, we see a whole lot of illnesses that are related to that. But in relation to what we're talking about today, if you're deficient in vitamin D, you can have low mood, right? And you can even experience depression. So it's important to get out in the sunlight, right? If you're in an area where you could go to the beach or just somewhere outdoors where you can experience the sun, take in those UV rays and allow that vitamin D to go in, right? Could be very, very instrumental in helping to shift your mood, right? And so there are certain times of the day that you can get the most absorption of the vitamin D from the sun. But you want to just be out and about, right? We talked about the exercise. Be out and about and in the sunlight, right? It can really, really be helpful, as well as in eggs and some mushrooms that are exposed to UVB rays, right? Those have high vitamin D found in them, as well as wild salmon, right? Those could be very, very helpful. Vitamin D, very important. Magnesium is another one. And so magnesium is one that's involved with the production of serotonin, right? Something that also is very helpful in helping us to calm down and take us to our happy place. You hear people say that, right? And so magnesium can be found in almonds, cashews, and dark chocolate. So, sometimes when you get stressed out, some people are, oh, I have to go for chocolate, right? It's not that you just like chocolate. The body is actually craving that magnesium, right? That draws you to the chocolate. So magnesium is also, the dark chocolate is high in magnesium. Another one is zinc, right? Zinc is another that can help you maintain a healthy immune system. So if you're deficient in zinc, it can also be linked to depression. And so where can you find zinc? In things like seeds, mostly in seeds like pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, also in mushroom, certain meats, and in seafood. Now that's my happy place. I love seafood, crab legs. I love it, right? And so when I'm having a downtime, if I eat seafood, I feel a little better, right? It boosts my mood. So it does help. So zinc is another one that can be helpful. Also iron. It contributes to increase in energy levels by oxygenation of your cells, right? So iron is very important. So especially for people that are anemic and do not have the higher levels of iron, this is very, very important. Try to find it in the foods that you eat, and you must take in good enough quantities, right? So that you can get a good dose. And so you can find iron in beans and nuts and dark leafy greens and dried fruits and red meat and also in fish. Also essential fatty acids, right? Those omegas, the omega-3s can also be helpful. It can help you to maintain brain function. So those that are deficient in omega-3, we find that it's also connected to low mood swings, low mood altogether, but mood swings, and then also fatigue. And so some things that you could find omega-3s in, of course, is any kind of oily fish like the salmon or sardines, anchovies, any of those oily type fishes they would have the omega-3s in them, as well as some of the nuts like walnuts, and some seeds as well, like chia seeds. Also, you can find it. Also, if you cannot find, and I mentioned some foods, but that is just a very, very small list, right, for the vitamins or the minerals that we mentioned. But it's very, very important that you look it up yourself, try to find more foods, and take in as much as you can. But if you can't do it all in the food, then there are some good supplements out there that you could use that could also be helpful. And we also want to think about, so not just supplements, also drinks, right? And so I mentioned before about the Tahitian noni juice. So that's something that's also very powerful, and that it really does help to shift mood as well, right? And so there are other supplements as well. There's another one that I have access to that I also use and that I also distribute is called Renewed. And it also does. It's called Renew, and it helps to renew many different factors or areas in your body, right? But it does help to boost and shift mood as well. And so another area we want to pay attention to is our gut. Our gut, it's important that we have good gut flora, right? And in so many cases, there's so many illnesses that are also connected to having poor gut flora. But in those cases that we have good gut flora, right? So if we pay attention and we take some supplements and different things that could help us to really increase in that area, it can reduce inflammation and it improves nutrient absorption, and it helps to feed the pathway that connects the brain to the gut, right? So things, regular foods that are useful or that have these good bacteria in them, right, are like fermented foods. And if you need to take something like over the counter, it can be prebiotics, probiotics. Kimchi is a food that you could also use. Anything that's fermented usually has some good bacteria in it that helps to build that good gut flora for you. Some other things to mention are some herbs, right? I mentioned earlier that the essential oils are made from, herbs and fruit and flowers, right? So these are things that are in nature. So there are some herbs, herbal supplements or teas that you could use, or even tinctures that you could use that could really, really help with shifting mood and giving you a better mood. And so some of them are turmeric. Turmeric is excellent. It has curcumin and that it helps with inflammation, right? But there's also lemon balm, which is, I mentioned earlier, Melissa. Melissa is lemon balm. Also ashwagandha, lavender, right? So not only in the not only in the essential oil, right, but you can have the tea, and you can get the actual, lavender, and you can, put it into a teapot, and you could really, you can really drink it as a tea, which could also be helpful. Also, spikenard is another one. Rhodiola is also excellent. I know Amazon has one, and I believe the Vitamin Shop also carries it. But it's a drink mix that you could use. It's a powder mix. You can add it to any drink. But it's rhodiola, which also helps with adjusting mood, right? Also, St. John's wort is another one. Chamomile, we usually think about that when we have an upset stomach. We need to calm our system, but it does. It overall calms our system, our nervous system. So that's also good, as well as holy basil. Now, another thing that's very, very important that we usually sleep on is having good sleep, right? Did you see how I did that? So, better sleep is very, very important. And so, regular sleep schedule is important to sleep at least 7 to 8 hours. I know it's very, very difficult to do, right? Because we have so many other things going on. But if we could set a schedule and we could sleep 7 to 8 hours per night, oh my goodness, we would be different people altogether. And so we need to develop not just a schedule for when we'll go to bed, and we need to go to bed the same time every night, wake up the same time every morning, but we also need to develop a bedtime routine, what we do to set ourselves in a good space to be able to go to sleep, right? And so the blue light that comes from our tablets and phones and things like that are not good for us, right? It's shown that will actually keep us awake longer, right? And also our minds are being activated by whatever it is that we're looking at. But it's very important that we develop a bedtime routine that helps us to kind of let go of the stresses for the day. Sometimes we do some self-reflections, or we may do some affirmations, we may do some prayers or some reading, those sorts of things, just to kind of, it should be winding you down at the end of the day, right? And so people that have sleep apnea are more likely to experience depression, anxiety, and mood, right? Because they're not having a good night's sleep, or they're not able to sleep the way that they should. Something else that I want to mention, and again, how all of these areas are interrelated, right? Is the financial component. So financially, it affects us emotionally and mentally, right? So and it goes either way. So either we are experiencing challenges financially, so we're stressed out, right? It's causing increased levels of stress because we don't have the finances we need, that we're struggling, we have a bill due, whatever it is. Or we have something that we need. Sometimes it's a life or death situation, and you can only acquire it by finances that you don't have. So those sorts of things could cause increased levels of stress. But it could also go the other way, right? When you're experiencing stress or emotional and mental distress, it could cause you to go out and spend in a manner that you shouldn't, right? Have you make purchases on things that you don't need. Some people you may hear, they are, what do you call them, mental eaters or emotional eaters, or like emotional shoppers. They go shopping because they're upset, they're going through something, so they go shopping, right? So it can affect us financially in both ways, right? Either the finances are causing it, or we can cause further financial distress, right? Because we're spending what we shouldn't be spending, causing further distress, right? So another one I wanted to mention, I did when we were talking about some of the other techniques, but more in specific to the different or examples that we were talking about under emotional and mental well-being. I mentioned journaling. So journaling is very important to do. It can be helpful, whereas you kind of just write down. Sometimes at the end of the day, some people just kind of do a dump into a journal, right? And just write all the things, all the feelings, or everything that they've experienced throughout the day. It could be very helpful. But it can also be helpful if you can write, right? Writing poetry, things like that, or writing books, writing a chapter of a book, or even doodling. And so there's also those like adult coloring books where you can, take your time and color, and those sorts of things are also very calming and can shift your mood as well. Another is create and rehearse daily affirmations that address and speak the truth into our challenged issues. Each journey towards healing is different. So we want to make sure that we use some of the things that we talked about to really help. So if you create some affirmations and rehearse those daily, the more you speak them, the more you will believe them, and the more you will see them come to pass in your life, the more you'll see them manifest, right? So it's not just in speaking, right? There are a lot of other things that we have to do, but life and death are in the power of the tongue. What we speak really, really does have effect, right? And some of our episodes down the line, we may talk more about a study that was done where we really see how words create a certain frequency, right? So that's not for today's topic. We'll talk about that at some point. But it is very important that we rehearse those things. And what I mean rehearse is that we have those daily declarations, and we always do an affirmation here at the end of our time together. And it's important that we do that because we need to speak positivity into a lot of the negative thinking that we're having. So we have to replace all those negative thoughts, all those negative things that we're hearing or thinking. We need to replace those with positivity. And something that is so important to understand is that many times even when we experience trauma or whatever we're having a reaction to, whatever we're triggered by, we always, or we tend to, right, as human nature, we tend to think, oh, we're hopeless. Oh, there's no way out of this. Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. We take on feeling overwhelmed, right, in the moment. And so many times we can't look beyond that moment. And so that's why you see where people end up in very difficult situations where I was talking earlier about the self-destructive behaviors, even the suicidal ideations, and some do succeed. But it's because they get caught up in the moment of this is where I am, this is the challenge that I'm experiencing, and there's never anything beyond this. And so the point that I want to make to you today is that no matter where you are in your journey of emotional and mental well-being, right? Your journey from brokenness to wholeness that we've been talking about today, it's very important that you understand that whatever it is that you're going through is only for a moment, but for a season, but for a time, but it will not last always. So don't make any rash decisions, and I gave some extreme, circumstances or examples, but it can be even in the minor things. Don't just make a rash decision and just do something because of where you are right now. One thing that's sure to happen is that seasons change, right? No matter what we go through, we always, every day, we have this cycle of daytime and nighttime, right? We have the morning, daytime, the evening, nighttime. It's a consistent cycle, just like with the seasons. No matter what happens in our world with all types of systems and all of that, seasons always change, right? And so I use that as an example to share with you just so that you understand no matter where you are today is not where you'll always be. So don't judge or predict your whole life based off of an experience that you're having or that you've had, right? So our goal is to really seek out wholeness, and that's the purpose of us being together. Wholeness is obtainable, right? So it is a journey for us, and which is why we're on this journey together. So we will talk about lots of issues, and we will talk about different techniques and things that we can do, but it's all on this journey towards wholeness, and it is obtainable. We're not just taking a journey to nowhere, right? It is obtainable. And when you get there, there's so much freedom. But please do not make a decision based off of where you are right now. If you live long enough, you'll know that you experience all types of things. And there's so many different phases and cycles and all of those things that we go through. But one thing is inevitable, is change. We never ever stay the same or in the same predicament. The same situation doesn't last always. As they say, trouble doesn't last always. So true. So hold on and just go through that process, because I assure you there is an opening. There is an end to it. So hang in there. And so I've shared some things that we could do overall, generally, that apply to all of them. And so I don't want you to just think about it. I want you to also put them into practice. If you can just take one or two things, right? Put them into practice, because each of our journeys towards healing, it looks different for each of us, depending on where we've been, what we've been through. It looks different for each of us. And the process takes time, right? We have to go through the process. It doesn't happen overnight. I wish we could snap our fingers, right? Like genies, we can't snap our fingers and they just bring wishes to pass, things don't happen overnight, right? So there are a process to some things. There are things that happen suddenly, right? But most times there is a process to it. And so we want to be able to embrace the process, know that it does take time. If yours is taking more time than someone else, you should not be comparing yourself to someone else. Everyone's journey and everyone's issues are different. And I mentioned about the ACEs. ACEs are common. Everyone has gone through some trauma, but everyone reacts to the trauma that they've experienced in different ways. So it's important that you give yourself the time that you need to go through your process. And so it's important to get a combination of spiritual support, professional support, personal reflection, and even consistent self-care, right? All those things we talked about. It can lead to meaningful recovery from emotional and mental brokenness. And so that's what we're after. Today we talked about brokenness and how to become whole in this pillar, right? In this aspect of our lives. Remember, for us to heal, we have to acknowledge. Remember, I said be honest with yourself. We have to acknowledge, and then we have to address it. Not ignore it, but we have to address the underlying issues. And so we must also be intentional about taking the right steps towards our wholeness. As I mentioned, the things that we talked about today, right? We need to really, really put them into practice, not just hear them, but to also do them. Because, as I mentioned, we're after wholeness. That's what we're on this journey to obtain, and it is obtainable. It is reachable for us. And so we are at the end of our time together today. Join me next week as we will continue our journey towards wholeness. Next week, we'll have a special guest with us that will share some things about wholeness with us. And so make sure you join us. I guarantee you that it will be life-changing. So make sure that you join us. It's very, very important. I guarantee it will be mind-blowing and life-changing. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, to rate, to leave a review. You can also follow us on social media and visit us at our website for any updates or other inspirational content. The links, of course, will be in the description below. Also, write in the comments any questions or topics you would like me to cover. I'd be interested to know what you want to hear about. So again, thank you for your time, giving me your time today. I am your host, Beatrice Hutcherson. And remember, your journey to complete wholeness, it starts here. So as we end, let us affirm together. Repeat after me. I decree that I will be whole mentally and emotionally. I declare that I will allow myself to be healed in this area of my life, and I will be renewed in my mind to live a transformed and more rewarding and joyful life. My prayer for each of you today is that you will receive healing and complete wholeness in the area of emotional and mental well-being. It is my prayer that you will receive complete wholeness physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. And that at the end of our journey and our time together, that your life will never, ever again be the same. And so until next time, take good care of yourself, mind, body, and soul. And until then, stay blessed and be made whole.
We thank you for sharing this time with us here at Wholeness Wednesdays. Thank you for joining us to explore and experience this journey to complete wholeness. Please remember that we are only an email away. Your questions and input are welcome via bhutch@completelywhole1.com. See you next time here at Wholeness Wednesdays.